The Wilderness Society has called it an extinction budget. The National Parks Conservation Association has called it catastrophic, and that the national park system will be completely decimated. These are strong words, and they are not an exaggeration. The Trump administration's budget proposal for fiscal year 2026 calls for drastic cuts to the national park system, which, if enacted as they are, would fundamentally destroy the national park system as we know it. In this video, I'm going to give you the full breakdown of the administration's budget proposal as it relates to the national parks. All right, before we dive into the numbers, two things I need to point out. Number one, this budget request is a different thing from the budget reconciliation bill. I already made a video about that and how it will impact national parks and public lands. Be sure to check that out if you're interested in that topic, because again, these are separate things. Do not get them confused. Now, number two, this budget request has almost a 0% chance of being enacted as is. For those of you who need a high school civics refresher, the president does not set the budget, Congress does. What the president does do, however, is send over a budget request, hoping to influence the process in some way and signal their administration's priorities. That's what we're talking about here today, the Trump administration's budget request for fiscal year 2026, specifically as it relates to the national parks. Again, this has almost a 0% chance of being enacted as it is currently laid out, but that doesn't mean it's not worth talking about. This proposed budget lays out this administration's overall vision, or lack thereof, for the national parks. And it also shows us just how much, or really how little, they care about these places. As we will see, this budget request clearly signals that the administration is not only seeking to deprioritize national parks, but to dismantle them completely. Here, let's just dive into the numbers and I can show you what I mean. We'll start with personnel. The administration is proposing to reduce staffing at the National Park Service from 13,648 in fiscal year 2024 to 8,130 in fiscal year 2026. That is 5,500 fewer rangers and support staff at the National Park Service, a reduction of 40% of the entire current workforce. Now, keep in mind that right now, even without a cut like that, the National Park Service is already in a full-blown catastrophic staffing situation. Its workforce is down 20% from 2010, and just this year, it has already lost 13% of its personnel through firings, pressured buyouts, and early retirement offerings, not to mention the reductions in force that are expected sometime this year as well, that we haven't even seen those yet. A cut like this would be nothing less than catastrophic to the national park system. We're talking about parks that are already running full-on skeleton crews, that are having PhD scientists cleaning bathrooms, having their staffing levels reduced by a further 40%. We're talking about deep institutional knowledge that has been passed down through generations of park stewards and rangers vanishing overnight. Never in the history of the Park Service have we seen something like this. And also, I know I'm focusing on national parks in this video, but the Forest Service would also lose 4,500 people and the BLM 1,100, so no public lands management agency is safe here. Now, in order to achieve staffing cuts that deep, the administration is also proposing an unprecedented slashing of the Park Service budget. So this year, the Park Service budget is a little over $3 billion, like $3.1 billion. This budget proposal calls for the fiscal year 2026 NPS budget to be cut to a little over $2 billion. We're talking about a $1 billion cut to the National Park Service budget, including $900 million in cuts to the Park Service's operations budget, which is like the day-to-day running of the parks. This is the largest single proposed budget cut in the history of the national parks. And it comes at a time when that money is needed more than ever. National parks just hit a record visitation last year, 332 million visitors in 2024. Now, I would also point out to you that right now, at an annual budget of $3.1 billion, which is still not even adequate to actually run the parks, it hasn't been for years, but even still, at $3.1 billion, this represents 1/15 of 1% of the federal budget. 1/15 of 1%. It essentially costs us nothing to operate and manage the national park system, and yet here we are proposing to decimate 1/3 of its budget. And here's another kicker for you. National parks generate $15 for the economy for every single dollar we spend on them. So not only are they dirt cheap to operate, but they provide an insane value for the national economy. Talk about efficiency. National parks are one of the most efficient parts of the entire federal government, and it makes absolutely zero sense to ask to reduce their funding by 1/3, especially considering some of the things we spend money on in this country. Now, we're not done, because in order to achieve those $1 billion in cuts, you obviously have to get rid of some stuff. You've already talked about the personnel situation. Firing 5,500 rangers will certainly make a dent, but it doesn't find $1 billion. No. In order to do that, you'll have to sell off the national parks themselves, which is exactly what they're proposing to do. According to the skinny budget proposal released by the administration, they say they want to, quote, transfer certain properties to state-level management to ensure the long-term health and sustainment of the national park system, end quote. So many problems with this, but let's start with this one. How many? How many national parks would you have to transfer to achieve $1 billion in cuts? Well, the NPCA has calculated that number at 350 out of 433 units of the national park system. That's right, folks. The administration is proposing cutting 80% of the national park system. 80%. Now, don't you worry, your Yellowstones, your Grand Tetons, your Grand Canyons, your Yosemites, those aren't going anywhere. Those are real national parks, according to these guys. No, the parks that would be going away are the smaller parks, the historic sites, the battlefields, the lake shores, the monuments. Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum has specifically called out sites like Theodore Roosevelt Birthplace National Historic Site in New York City and Knife River Indian Village's National Historic Site in his home state of North Dakota. I've been to both of those sites. Knife River Indian Village's the visitor center there is shaped like an eagle, for crying out loud. And both of those sites are absolutely wonderful and completely deserving of their place in the national park system because of their place in American history. Burgum also suggested that, quote unquote, some battlefield site someplace could be given the axe, as if that battlefield site someplace wasn't somewhere where Americans died defending the values and ideas this country was built on. But sure, let's sell it to the highest bidder because it doesn't see 1 million visitors a year. This is a gross misrepresentation and fundamental misunderstanding of what the national park system is. And I'm getting real tired of this assets on a balance sheet shtick that fundamentally ignores that national parks don't have to make a profit to provide value to the American people. Even though, as we've already discussed, they literally do make a profit. Now, I know somebody is going to try and point out that, well, hey, actually, some of these sites probably could be transferred to the states. We don't need all of these parks, do we? Well, actually, yeah, we do. The selection process for creating national park sites is not some willy-nilly pull a name out of a hat sort of deal. It's not random. There is a rigorous set of criteria involving national significance, suitability, feasibility, and yes, they look at whether or not the National Park Service is the best land manager for a proposed site. All NPS sites go through this process to be included in the national park system. So to suggest that some of these sites are less important to America than others is, once again, completely, deeply dishonest and a fundamental misunderstanding of how the national park system operates and has operated for quite some time. But let's ignore all of that and say, okay, some of these sites can go to the states. They can't, but let's just pretend they can. If certain national park sites were transferred to the states, you all but guarantee that they will not stay public for long. Individual states simply do not have the financial or personnel resources necessary to maintain these sites, which would inevitably mean that they would be incentivized to sell them off, to privatize them. And just like that, America's intangible natural and cultural heritage will be stripped from the public's hands. That's what you're looking at when you propose transferring sites to the states. Certain states, like New Mexico, have already said they don't want them because, again, they can't maintain them. And get this, we have examples of sites that were placed under the protection of the National Park Service in the first place precisely because people didn't trust the states that they were in to properly take care of them. Big Cypress National Preserve in Florida is a prime example of this. And that's it, folks. All you have to do is follow the money here. $1 billion in cuts to the National Park Service. That's going to lead to 40% fewer park rangers in your national parks and 80% fewer national parks for you to visit. It's that simple. Now again, this budget stands no chance of being passed like this. But remember, it signals an intent. It signals that this administration has no interest in protecting the national parks and that indeed they would see them sold off to the highest bidder. This budget doesn't have to be passed to still do damage. I will leave you with this. At a House Appropriations Committee meeting, when the subject of transferring parks to the states came up, Representative Mike Simpson of Idaho, a Republican, said this, quote, "Let's not screw up the national parks because that's something the American people will never forgive us for," end quote. He's right, guys. We will never forgive them. The national parks truly are America's best idea. And we need to make sure that we hold leaders like Burgum and Simpson and all of the rest of them who have a responsibility, a duty, accountable to protecting and preserving our national parks. There's a link in the description where you can do just that. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know your thoughts on all this down below. I know it's likely to be spicy down in there in the comments. I did get a little heated here in this video, but it's important we make our voices heard, and that includes myself. I have this platform and I intend to use it. All the stuff that's going on at the parks right now is deeply, deeply unsettling, and I feel it is my obligation to bring your attention to it. So let me know what you think down there in the comments. As always, direct support on Patreon is always appreciated. With a niche channel like this, every little bit of fan funding helps go a long way toward keeping this whole ship afloat. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.